Next up on this edition of Extra Time After Hours, two teams in a war of attrition at BBVA Compass Stadium with a berth on the MLS Cup on the line. All the feedback and highlights from our guys on MLSsoccer.com. A big one out of BBVA coming up next. Greetings, and welcome to another edition of Extra Time After Hours here on MLSsoccer.com. A little bit earlier this time around. I like these afternoon games. We're not up so late. You know these guys from Extra Time Radio, Simon Borg and Greg Lawless. I'm Nick Forshaw, caught up on our sleep this weekend, I think.
Yeah, a little less after hours, I think.
Yeah,
this one's
sort of an afternoon.
It is dark out, so.
Hours. Nonetheless, recapping a big game in the Eastern Conference Final. The first leg between the Houston Dynamo and DC United just finished up on the NBC Sports Network out at BBVA Compass Stadium. More than 22,000 people in attendance for this one. And in the end, they got what they wanted. The Houston Dynamo with a 3-1 win over DC United. They carry that lead into the second leg next weekend. Before we get to you guys, I want to remind everybody else out there that we have a new face on the show here today. It's Josh Weisenhunt, the MLS insider. He's going to be taking your tweets. If you have any comments or questions about the game, there he is right there. If you have any comments or questions, let us know. Shoot a note to @ExtraTimeRadio. A lot to talk about in this game, fellas. Simon, I'll start with you. Your overall thoughts. Houston Dynamo with a 2-goal aggregate lead going into the second leg.
You can book your tickets. Well, kinda. LA or Seattle are going to be hosting MLS Cup. I think we can say it with a lot of confidence here. A 2-goal lead to a Dominic Kinnear team now heading to the road. You gotta believe Dynamo's chances now are really good. DC way too much to overcome. You had the injuries, the big ref decision, and then big mistakes in that second half.
Greg, what do you think?
Well, I think the big news is actually Brandon McDonald's injury is going to be one that really resounds forward into the second leg. He was such a beast, I think, for them so far in these playoffs that his injury is going to be one that's really going to hurt them and make it very difficult for them.
This was a physical game out at BBVA Compass Stadium. Definitely some injuries. There's Brandon McDonald, one of a number of guys who went down in this game for both teams. Like I said in the intro, a war of attrition. Our very own Andrew Wiebe said this was the best attended MLS Reserve League game in league history. That was one of the big themes on Twitter. Our very own Josh Weisenhunt, though, takes our first question of the day. Josh, what do you got?
Right now, does Houston have that same comeback if that red right before the half is given?
Yeah, we'll certainly get to that red card. Andre Hainu at the epicenter of a lot of action today, but it all switched when there was this non-call there at the end of the first half.
Stoppage time in the first half, and DC United had Rafael Augusto making his MLS debut, going towards goal, and Haino has no choice but to hook his arm and pull him down.
He has a choice.
Well, I mean, yeah, he has a choice.
He has a choice. But look, and we're going to see it in a second, but there was
I have to ask you about that.
The broadcast that Peter Walton from Pro came on and said he thought it should have been a yellow card. And I think I have to disagree and say this was a red cardable offense. It was definitely a goal-scoring opportunity that was denied to Rafael Augusto, and this should have been a red card. And that was the news we were talking about on Twitter. That's what changed the game.
Certainly one of the biggest plays of this game. Keep those Twitter questions coming at Extra Time Radio. Josh will get to a few more in the show. But for now, let's take a look at some of the biggest highlights of this game, especially for DC United right off the bat, considering they're on the road. They've been on the road since Tuesday, going back to the New York Red Bulls game earlier this week, and they got stuck, and et cetera, et cetera. They went straight down to Houston. They've been on the road, but they got off to a great start in this one, courtesy of the hero of that New York Red Bulls game. It's Nick DeLeon, the rookie out of Louisville, who puts DC United on the board. A lot of people rooting for him for now U.S. national team. Let's slow down first. Let's just take into consideration what he's done in the postseason. Second game in a row with a goal. This one late in the first half. There it is with a nice finish time. This kid played well.
I'm not going to single out him for praise. I'm going to single out Ben Olsen. Why? Because the Chris Pontius injury happened, and Chris Pontius was on the left. Louis Neal, left-footed, came in for Pontius, but he didn't just slot him in on the left. He threw him on the right, DeLeon on the left, and that play started because of DeLeon, and DeLeon finished off the play he started.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've seen from DC a lot. He likes to sometimes switch it up so the guys cut to the inside, and it's no coincidence coincidence that there it is, De Leon cutting to the inside to hit it with his right foot on goal. Yeah, it's on the rebound, and Pajoy did well to get down the side. A little bit, though, that's a tactical move, too. That Pajoy could get that space is almost tactics from a DC side.
I think Olsen's tactics were really good. A lot of people give him credit for being the rah-rah guy and rallying troops, but tactically he did very well. What he did was Rafael Augusto went into attacking mid. Boscovich was helping Perry Kitchen at defensive midfield, and then you had Louis Neal and De Leon running the show from the side. So I think great work by Olsen, but in the end, tired legs.
So a good start for DC United. It looked like they were going to get off to an even better start late in the first half, stoppage time, in fact. The call that was the buzz on Twitter. This one, Greg, take us through it.
Well, look, first of all, Augusto gets space in behind, and he's through. He's ahead. He's got a step on Adol. You can see the highlight right there where he grabs him by the arm and pulls him down. It's just sort of yanking him down. Now, that's impossible for the referee to see, that part of it. Saying that, I can understand where the referee from behind might look at it and say they were neck and neck as they're running. But obviously, when he grabs his arm and yanks him down, that's the foul, that's the red card. And even from behind, I think, he should have been able to recognize that Augusto was about a half a step. He had a little bit of a half a step. So Hainault is already coming from behind, and that's the foul.
So this was the buzz on Twitter. We got another question from Josh Weisenhunt, the MLS insider. Josh, what do you got?
Yeah, well, just a couple comments on that one. They were obviously coming in hot and heavy. We asked what would be your decision if you were the referee in that one, and Zach Woosley on Twitter says, I'm a Dynamo fan. You shouldn't even have to ask. It's a clear red card. And then on the other side, Joe Janicek says, not in his opinion, the DCU player Augusto in this case initiated the first contact. So there was some debate, but overwhelmingly, of course, most people would have given the red in that situation.
Hang on was initiated the first contact. Look, this is a contact sport. There's going to be contact initiated. He's allowed to go with the shoulder to shoulder right there, which is what he does in that case. It's Hainault that's a half a step behind, and he comes in sideways almost and takes him down. And then, of course, there's the yanking. He's a Canadian, man. That's like hockey right there. Drag him down.
Nonetheless, this call was not called. Ricardo Salazar let this one slide. There's one more look at it. Andre Hainault with it's a nice takedown.
It's a good takedown.
And you see Olsen on the side in the white shirt behind Augusto.
Watch
Once it happens, he's going nuts.
Yeah, so we saw Ben Olsen at halftime with some comments about Ricardo Salazar. Again, this one not called. Andre Hainault's going to have a big part later on in this game. He actually got the equalizer for the Houston Dynamo. That seems to be the way it always works. When the guy is in a controversial call, he comes out and he plays a big role later on. He did so in the second half, pulled the Houston Dynamo even, and now it's 1-1 at this point, and now you're wondering if DC United's momentum is starting to fade, Greg.
Well, that was what it was. I think when Hainault gets the equalizer, I think you start to see, number one, the fatigue. Let's not forget that DC United played on Thursday. Now, I know on Thursday night I said that shouldn't matter, but I think they go down, they have to travel all the way from New York. You talked about them being on the road. And they end up just starting to lose a lot of their.
They fell asleep on the goal.
Yeah, they fell asleep on the. Well, they fell asleep on the free kick very quick. You're right, and this is a nice play by Boynik Garcia, by the way, in the cross to get it in there, just to find them. So.
Yeah, so a quick free kick there. Houston Dynamo got on the board again. They took the lead 2-1 behind another goal from Will Bruin, who has played very well in the postseason here. Scored a couple goals against Chicago Fire, played well against Sporting Kansas City. He showed up here again, and he gave the Houston Dynamo the lead. Some persistence here.
No, I was going to say the key thing is that just moments before you had Bobby Boswell having to clear off the line, and then Houston go on the other end and they score the goal that gives them the edge in the series. And then you felt all of a sudden everything shifting towards the Dynamo's favor.
And by the way, that's Giles Barnes that makes the run down the side and gets around Djokovic to get them into the area and then hit the ball across. Giles Barnes probably wouldn't have been on the field.
Right. If
someone else hadn't gotten injured. He came on, I think he came on for Moffitt actually when Moffitt went down. So he comes on the field, and just in general, he probably wouldn't be on the field. First of all, Hainault shouldn't be on the field, and he scores a goal.
Right.
Barnes is on the field, and he ends up having a role in this as well, and probably the biggest role he's had since he's joined the Houston Dynamo.
And he's on the field because Dominic Kinnear opts to go to a 4-3-3 from the 4-2-2. It's a 4-3-3 that everyone has said doesn't suit Will Bruin well. He's here getting the goal, by the way, leads the playoffs with 4 goals.
And also, you don't like the 4-3-3 in the playoffs. You were very adamant last week about how the 4-3-3 fails in the playoffs. You saw it in Kansas City. Why does this one work this
Well,
time?
against a team with this many injuries and that many tired legs, you had about 4 guys who couldn't go anymore on the field for DC. Korb, Boscovich, De Leon. With 15 minutes left, they had nothing left in their legs.
It really was a battle out there, and the Houston Dynamo in the end got the best. They added a third goal thanks to Kofi Sarkodie, who doesn't score that often. There's been a lot of questions about him in his first couple years for the Dynamo, but here he caps this one off, a nice punctuation mark, and a big 2-goal lead now, Greg, for the Houston Dynamo.
Yeah, this is probably the most important goal of all of them ultimately, because I think having that second goal is not only important from the number side, psychologically it makes it so much more difficult for DC when they go home. And Kofi Sarkodie, this is a great goal. Other than the Martinez goal that we saw from Seattle, this might be the second best goal we've seen in the playoffs so
Great
far.
technique by Kofi Sarkodie, but we have to point out a failed clearance there by Rafael Augusto.
How much of it was fatigue at this point? We'll talk about injuries here. A lot of guys went down, and this, especially Brandon McDonald. Greg, you mentioned him right off the top. DC lost some key players today. How much was fatigue at the end of this game?
I think it's fatigue. I think Simon's right that you have these injuries, so you have some players that maybe don't play with each other. I mean, Augusto is making his MLS debut. I mean, he's never played with these guys. And so, yeah, the fatigue is a big thing. All of the injuries for DC. Losing Pontius, I think, was almost like a mental blow, but it didn't really stop them. They did okay in the first half, even without Pontius.
Let's be clear here. DC United suffered the most on the injury front. I mean, great. Moffitt left the game because of an injury. Fine. But, I mean,
chances are Clark is back anyway to fill that role.
But DC United are the ones that are really hurt by injuries because they had to make 3 subs in 55 minutes, which is unheard of. So they're the ones who really got
At
hurt.
halftime, you could hear it in Ben Olsen's voice when he was like, first of all, he's like, I don't know why Haynal hasn't been kicked out. And secondly, he's saying, I've already used 2 subs. It's only halftime. How can this happen?
3 subs in 55 minutes, on top of the fact that Bill Hamid and Andy Nahar were both suspended for this game for their transgressions earlier on in the postseason. On the Houston Dynamo side, they played this one without Kalen Carr and Ricardo Clark. Ricardo Clark's been so good. Some injuries for the Houston Dynamo, but maybe not as bad as DC United going into the second leg.
Yeah, I mean, arguably to start this game, Houston had the biggest losses. But now going into the second leg, does DC have enough time this 1 week to get Pontius back from a groin injury? To get McDonald back from his injury, looked like a calf.
Carr. Or
No,
you're
I'm
talking
talking about DC.
Yep.
Is a week enough?
Yeah.
That's the big question mark.
Big questions around injuries, big questions on Twitter. We send it back to our MLS insider, Josh Weisenthal. Josh, what do you got?
Yeah, here's a funny one coming in from Henrik on Twitter. He wanted to know exactly that. Will DC have any players left for the second leg back at RFK?
Well, they'll have a few. I mean, they're going to get Bill Hamid back for this game. He only misses the first leg, right, with the red card. But in terms of field players, you saw Pontius, Zaragoza, and McDonald all go down. This is not the time of the year you want those guys on the injury list.
We don't know the severity yet of these injuries and whether there's something to come back. I am very curious, even though he wasn't in the lineup or even in the team right now, is Dwayne De Rosario maybe with another week, can he get a couple of minutes next week when you might need him? Even if you put him on for that lift. Let's say it's, you have 30 minutes left and he's been in the 18, he may not start, may not go the whole time, but you might need that lift. And maybe you're looking to extra time, you need those legs as well.
And if you're a DC fan looking to take hope, De Leon gets a week of rest, so that's going to help him.
Yeah.
And Pajoy was going strong till the final minute here, so he gives you a lot of faith that he's going to be one of the difference makers potentially in that second leg.
So some final thoughts here. DC United down 2 goals, going home to RFK Stadium. It's been such a big year for DC United getting back to the postseason. The Houston Dynamo in their 5th conference final in the last 7 years. The Dynamo with the edge now, potentially looking towards MLS Cup in a few weeks. Final thoughts going into the second leg, fellas. Is this a deficit that the Houston Dynamo can give up? Maybe DC United can come back. Greg, what do you think?
Well, I think if we look at what Houston did when they went to Sporting Kansas City, they had a 2-goal lead. We saw that in the last round, and what they were able to do, and they just sort of hung on by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes? Skin of their teeth? Is that what it is? By the
Yeah.
chinny chin
Hair of
chin
the
or something?
chinny chin, whatever.
Whatever it is. They barely hung on, but they hung on. They have the bodies that can man up defensively the way that they can. If Boswell continues playing the way he is, he's my MVP of the playoffs if they make it to the Cup and maybe win it, because he's been phenomenal. And so that for them is what they have experience doing it, and that's what makes it so difficult for DC.
Simon?
Look, I think that a 2-goal lead for Dominic Kinnear team, I expect him to maybe go 4-5-1, super ultra defensive in DC. Look, DC RFK is going to be rocking. DC is going to have a lot of momentum. If they get that first goal, you like their chances to tie up the series. But again, Houston has 2 goals to work with here. I like the Dynamo's chances.
So the Dynamo a 3-1 aggregate goal lead going into the second leg of the Eastern Conference Finals next week, 4 p.m. Eastern on the NBC Sports Network, November 18th. And a quick reminder, the night is not done. We will be back with another edition of Extra Time After Hours following the first leg of the Western Conference Final between the Seattle Sounders and the LA Galaxy out at the Home Depot Center. That should be a good one. Plenty to talk about later this evening. Now, for the guys, Josh Weisenhunt, the MLS insider, Simon Borg, Greg Lawless, and the entire technical crew been working all afternoon. I'm Nick Furshaw. Extra Time After Hours coming back later tonight. Stay with us on MLSsoccer.com.
Off woodwork and in! Shot! Goal! Room to shoot. David Beckham! Oh, goodness me! There's a nice little flag for 3! Who else? He is simply clutch! Plenty of options, one of which is the absolute fantastic strike!
Voting is now open for the AT&T Goal of the Year. Vote early, vote often on MLSsoccer.com.
Off woodwork and in!